Okay, so it's coming up on my dad's birthday, and he passed away some years ago. But I want to do this kind of in honor of him. I don't know of any other way of doing it, and I watch some aviation stuff every once in a while, especially old footage, and I've been able to check out old footage of like where I used to live at about the time I used to live when I was a kid and stuff. And I was like, oh, I remember that, and pictures and scenes out of it and stuff. And it's been pretty neat. And also I'll go and check out concerts and see, and I've even found the concert I was at, and someone had filmed it and so on like that. So it's pretty neat. But I like watching aviation things, and I was way into planes at one time, and I was gonna be a flyboy at one time, and the Air Force even groomed me a little bit, but then it didn't quite work out. And I could have been Goose, but I couldn't have been Maverick, basically. But if I had done their 2 year thing, then I could redo the deal and try to become a Maverick, but I wouldn't be able to do it until I was like the 4th year and re-enlist and that kind of crap they were talking about. If I could, qualify for Maverick and not be a Rio, guy in the back seat. And, I wanted to be a flyboy because my dad had wanted to be a flyboy, but due to some circumstances, I heard from him himself, he didn't make it to Top Gun so much, but then he was always in planes. And then whenever he retired from the Air Force, he was out here at this place that does custom planes, builds the president's airplanes. It's called E-Systems and stuff, and worked his way up through that and everything, and was on the flight line for quite some time, flying with the planes, running their tests and doing all their things. He was part of the test department. So he was always on planes, but he never got to be the flyboy. And I thought, if I could be the flyboy, maybe that'd make my dad feel better about the situation. I sure as hell think that'd be cool as hell. And problem is, we're running right into the time where Top Gun came out. Okay? So, even though I'm doing all these ancient studies and all this type of stuff, I decided to flip it and decide, well, I can do this. And, there's back then they had these Pell Grants and all this stuff in the service and stuff, and they'll give you all kinds of schooling and things like that goes along with it. You can do that while you're doing this. And if you get you start making hellish money too, decent for the time, and you make good money at first because you're not having to spend so much because you're living off of them basically as you're accruing checks and things like that. So it really helps out a family start getting going and things like that and everything. And of course, that isn't where I was thinking at this time. I want to be looking Maverick. So anyhow, long story longer, and I hope this isn't too long, but I'm just going to shed here for a little bit and tell you a story about things and something that was important to me, and maybe relate a few other stories too. This is the symbol that they used, and you can see it's a winged scepter that's on fire. So, and we could look at this and see symbolism out like the house. So, but it's called Air Training Command, and what they did is they had just started this Air Force thing, and part of it was going to end up being NASA, really, and so everything was kind of separated and weird, and they were getting, just getting good at carriers and this, that, and the other. And from what I understand, this was a grooming department, and they had like 3 or 4 more. One was Miramar, the other one was out in San Diego, and one in Florida. And I don't know, one of them was supposed to have been more like the Marines and the people that land on carriers and things, but they would be picked out of a group. And then there were other guys that were going to end up being test pilots and crap for like F-101s and all these new planes that had coming out. And they were kind of told about this as that's what we're grooming all these people out of. But they had a bunch of people in the training thing, and I don't know, my dad said it was something like 65 of them, but 55 of them stayed in the whole thing in the first place of it, and some of the other ones already got selected to go out to do something else that had to do with aircraft, like maintenance and things like that. Like they weren't going to make it in this, but maybe they'd do that. And so anyhow, and this is before Korea. This is just before Korea. And a lot of y'all know maybe about Vietnam and stuff, and most people don't think about Korea that we had before that. But so he's stationed in Korea after this. But back whenever he was in his training, he was just stationed here in the States. Sorry, he's just stationed here in the States. At Hondo Air Force Base is where he took his air flight command. And this is a representation of it, and from what I understand, this is when they were making it and finishing it off, because I can see some barracks in the bottom left-hand corner and stuff, but the big aircraft hangars aren't here, although that white area on the right side looks like that's a row of them, but there's a bunch more than that, and there's a couple of airfields there. It's a decent-sized place. It can take us like a 727 off in it, and supposedly after this fact they put lengthened it and made it 747 worthy in all the directions. But that was much more after this. They didn't have the 747 out then and all this stuff, but at the point that they could put the, any of the passenger planes on this thing, it was big enough to do so. So whenever somebody's in a trainer or these type of planes, it doesn't take half the runway to take off. That's pretty neat. But so it's kind of a trainer kind of thing, and the way I understand it, and I used to know exactly where it is, but it's over right here in this area, like, so San Antonio's down here, El Paso's up over here, and it's right in this area here. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and that's what they wanted. And there's some mesa out there, and there's Big Bend country down here that has some mountains in it, but other than that, this area is just flat. All this is flat, and you are in places here hundreds of miles in between where anybody really lives very much, and so it makes it pretty easy to use. And they did fake bombing runs and all kinds of things with it, right? And so they even used some of these type of planes when they were first coming out, but that's not what they trained in. But they were set up to do bombing runs like this, and they had everybody doing this type of thing, and it's kind of like, you're going to be an aircraft, son, so let's see what your niche is, versus, pre-selecting or doing whatever. And this was the burgeoning time, so they were trying to figure it out. So they had them do some of this and some of that, and let's see where you're at. And then they would specialize in a way, right? Something like that, the way I understand it. Now this is where the barracks have been built all up. These right here are barracks, and these are giant plane hangars here, and smaller plane hangars, and then a row of them all out here over two. And some of this is maintenance, and some of it's something else. Everything is pretty decent sized place, and we're kind of looking at it from the side now that's there. And this is an old picture from 1950, 52, 53. And here's a picture of these guys, and my dad would have been one of them. And one of them even looks kind of really like my dad, but that, I'm sure this probably isn't the same year in my dad or anything like that. And here's all these what they call flyboys, and they're all watching this guy and this guy here, and by using a simple sextant type deal, he is explaining how you figure out where the hell you are on the earth, and declination and all the different things, and explaining all out to these guys. And they got to get this, because what they're fixing to do is stick them in the back of a plane, and they ain't really got no windows to look out and see what the hell they're going, and they've got to know, due to the airspeed and all their things that they're doing, where they're at, so that they can almost do a blind bomb run. And this is just, they've only done 5 or 6 exercises, and now all of a sudden they're doing blind bomb runs. And you've got to turn around and fake bomb some area in a night run. Of course, my dad said they didn't even do these night runs at night. It's just basically you're in the back of it, so wouldn't matter anyhow. You ain't looking out the window, you ain't got nothing, and you got to figure out where to make it to do the bomb runs. And they do a series of those, and then they have fly day where you're flying your planes and doing that, and you're in a trainer at first, and they're teaching you how to fly it, and you fly a plane, and you get fully licensed kind of deal, and you know what the hell to do and what not to do, and teach you all that stuff. And supposedly that's whenever you're a bomber guy, if they shoot out one of those guys, you're the guy in the back, like whenever you're in a regular airplane and they go, is there anybody here who can fly the plane? Well, yeah, you're a guy that can fly the plane, right? So they had these bombers that are set up like this with these double props that are on them, and this is what it looked like kind of inside of this. My dad's none of these people. I'd be surprised if he was, but damn, that doesn't look a little bit like him whenever he's young. But in here, they've got all these tablets, all these things, and all these gadgets. And what they're doing is they're setting up bomb runs and got to set it and run it off. And I don't know if this is the real plane or if it's a trainer, because he acted like the trainer kind of was just like the whole thing. So you'd go in this hangar and you'd sit in this, and they'd pretend you can go if you want to, but they're pretending they're going and what the speed is and all these things, and you've got to try to become accurate and get it there. And they do things like, okay, can you make it to a refueling point and then go bomb someplace and then make it back to a refueling point and then come back and all these type of things, right? So it's pretty neat hearing about all this. And my dad was flying in a lot of these right here, and here's your trainer where you're the guy in the back and he's a trainer. And so these T trainers that they had would basically get you where you can fly in the next level of these airplanes. And then from there, they have these brand new airplanes, and like I was talking about, F-1 Voodoos and different airplane Sabres and stuff that were out that they're not flying at this point, but you'd be going on to that if you specialize that way versus bombing versus whatever, you know. And they need a bunch of bombers, but they need a bunch of pilots too. And this is Korea, and they're gearing up for it. So they've been told something like 10 of these guys are going to be selected out of this 55, right? And sorry, get a drink. So out of this 55, 10 are going to be selected, they seem to think, you know, or whatever, and they're all hot about it. Then they heard it was 6 for something, and they're going, okay, well, 10 bombing and 6 things, and that's 16 people, and we've got 52 here, guys, and this is, you got a, you know, 1 in 4 chance, 1 in 5 chance, you're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna. So wonder what all the rest of us are gonna do. And this was kind of a thing on it or whatever. But what they had done to my dad, right after they did the first set of it, and they did some little survival training with him, is they made him the guy that's gonna tabulate the scores. And they put it on him, and it really wasn't that big of a deal. But then he also had to go to the CO's office and put the clipboard or whatever that has all the info on it every day in there, not in his office or anything, but out front. And then he has to go and get it every day and I guess sign it out or whatever, and keep up with it. But there's a copy made of it or something that's in the office anyhow, and somebody else makes another copy and gives it to the guys that are running the whole show, and each one of them gets a copy of it or something like that, you know, running the whole show. So it's not like that's the only one. Let me just say that. But it's, you know, this is going somewhere, don't you? Yeah. So anyhow, so they're about what they said was halfway through the training, and I forget whatever it was. It was going to be 24 weeks or something like that total, or something, or maybe the part before in this one, which was like 8 weeks, and then that it was going to be 24. I don't, something around in there, and I don't want to misquote it, but something like that. I don't know. And when they're about halfway done with it here, all of a sudden they said that they're getting these new guys in, and it became the big fuss around everywhere. And what they were getting was these people that were already signed in to be a commissioned officer that are re-signed in, and they're going to make them a flyboy. And that's pretty much what they heard out of it. And there's like 10 or 12 of these guys. And so they're thinking, oh wow, 15 and 6, and now 10 or 12 are going to go to these guys. They're just going to automatically throw them through. So there was some adamancy about it. And my dad's little bunkmate, if you will, the guy with the bed across the way, they were like little hotels and kind of and stuff, and back-to-back duplexes and little categories of 4, and you know, anyhow, his bunkmate was one of the top ones. My dad was too. My dad was easily in the top 10. He said he was inside a top 6, and so whatever they wanted to do with me, right? But this other guy was like second, and he knew it. And let me preface this. When they gave him the deal, they said, now don't tell anybody, because you're going to be tabulating the scores, and so you might be able to do it. And they basically just walked him into what he would do to cheat, to tell everybody is, you're going to be tabulating stuff, so you'd be going around telling people what they needed to do, and that might make him do something strange or blah, 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 and all this shit and everything. He just told me they basically, you know, don't do it. Well, lo and behold, these new guys come in, and basically what my dad said was they suck. They they suck. They let them fly in a plane like this that's a double trainer. Then they got the next plane that's there, and these guys show up and they only do a few flights and they fly their next plane. And one of their guys that thinks he's the shit ends up having a flashlight that comes into the back of it, and it lights up and it's flickering and it lights up and flickering and lights up, bouncing around the plane just a little bit. He thinks he has a fire in the back of his plane and has to come in and not do his run and stuff, and they figured out it was a flashlight and they make fun of him. Anyhow, so they had this yearbook that they made, and it's like the old fancy yearbooks with like a leathery surface onto it, Hondo Air Force Base, blah, blah, blah. You flip through it, it's got all this stuff at the back of it. They even signed it. It's really like a yearbook type of thing that they did, and it was kind of neat. Everybody signed my dad's yearbook. But there was also pictures in there where it showed them all, like in front of certain planes, and it was just like the whole group was right there. And then but it was, way back, and it was hard to tell which one my dad had to go, okay, I'm like fourth on the left or whatever. One of those school pictures, you just way the hell out and you got 50 people. But whenever they had the groups that were specializing, they had them in front of each one, and you could easily tell. And it's like as soon as I saw them, look through the picture, I go, there you are, and stuff. And they had pictures of them around the planes and doing things and studying and this, that, and the other. And it was just like a real yearbook that you'd see, especially back in the old days with the 50s and people hamming it up and stuff and making jokes. And supposedly they made a little talent show. They did all kinds of things. Oh, by the way, they were seeing movies that were just out, like in the show. Anyhow, they were showing them at a movie house that they had here, off a reel to reel, bam, and they were watching these movies that were just out like last year and stuff that you may not have seen. So it was current movies and stuff he talked about, and the food there was the best place that he ate in the Air Force for quite some time. I remember him saying something along that line. And he seemed to like to make comments. There was a few times in my life where I remember him making comments about what place was good food, and what about the others? And just nah. It's not like your mom's cooking. Let's just put it like that, and things like that. But anyhow, so my dad is running this test, and these guys show up, and they're sucking. And he comes to find out that a lot of them, they've only got like 2 in the top 10. And other guys are just off the end of it. If they're going to pick 16, they're half their guys aren't going to make it, right? Half their guys aren't going to make it. Then they come to specializing, and when they come to specializing, that would have been the choices. And they grabbed some extra guys that weren't going to make it and made it into there. And my dad just looked at the numbers and he goes, well, no matter which way they're looking at it, they're fudging some people in here for some freaking reason, right? And that's not good, okay? But they go with it, and he mentions it like whenever they're bitching about the shit to some of his buddies and everything. One of them is his little guy right there that was in second here not long ago, at least. And so they go through their specializing, and they're getting through it right to the end of it, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they act like we're gonna end this a hair early and we've made some decisions kind of concept, and they want to do some special training right now in these last few weeks with certain guys. And they pulled these guys, these commissioned officers, out, and they're going to be lieutenants and captains right off the bat and stuff off doing it. They pulled them out. They want to do something special, and they pulled out like 10 of the 12. And all of a sudden, everybody got livid in the group, and supposedly after chow hall or something or whatever, they got together, and it was quite the rumble thing. And you can imagine something, them talking about it, oh, that's bullshit. And my dad knew the numbers, and so he was telling people he couldn't tell or whatever off of it, but his celly was like, man, you told me that I was second, and he goes, you're like third or whatever. And he goes, so there's no way that I'm screwed, and I got screwed out of the deal, right? So, long story longer, they go ahead and keep finishing off the deal. And what happens is, what happens is the guy finds out, so he goes in and breaks into the CO's office at night, takes the thing, runs it through the copier, makes copies for himself, and then puts the thing back in and leaves, right? Ta-da-da. Well, everything's okay. Nobody finds out about that. But then all of a sudden, he brings it up to the base commander guy, that my numbers are this, that, and the other, and da da da, and I should have been selected for this and that and the other thing, and throw a fit, right? Well, come to find out, every one of these at this place has been selected, and they're gonna be flyboys. They're just deciding which one it is, and it's not like that. And this first number of being selected is gonna go to like Top Gun concept. And a lot of those, they know they're gonna die. They told this guy straight out, like, you're an idiot. But they're gonna do that, and we don't want you for that because you're one of our best, this, that, and the others, and da da da. But he's in trouble like hell because he broke into the thing and did the deal, and so they're gonna court-martial this guy. And it's not supposed to be so bad. They're gonna knock him out and where he can be in the service he wants to, but he ain't gonna be no damn flyboy, that's for sure. Okay? And so they have this court-martial, and he asked my dad to stand up for him and everything in it. And my dad said, I ain't gonna let him lie on you or any bullshit, right? And so he got the ability to go to the dude's trial and everything off of, I can have 3 people or witnesses or some kind of crap, and he got the ability to go to that. Meanwhile, before that all happened, they finished it off, and they're going to be flyboys and fly in these planes and do all these things, and everybody's going to be fine, and every one of them was going to be flying in combat, except for 10 of them that are taken from that other thing, the way that I understand that he said it. And the rest of them are either going to be flying planes and they're going to be Maverick, or they're going to be a bomber situation. And there's only one set of planes back then that you do as a goose type thing or whatever, and you have a back player off of, and it's not considered that much of a thing, blah, 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 right? So, I don't know, that's just some kind of trainer, probably right off the bat, teaching somebody how to fly a plane, and then they get in the other one nowadays or whatever. And there's a little hot shot plane that's a single. Let's see what else they got. Oh, they got MiGs. And all of these modern planes, of course, they have run out there and things, and this is nothing like what my dad was dealing with in any way, and the F-15s and F-18s here and stuff. That's cool. Yeah. Powerful as hell. Can take off real quick, too. It's amazing. What they'll do is they'll dogfight things, and they have this guy, and it's just like you saw in the Top Gun movie, where the guy, they chase him down, or they try to act like they're attacking him and do things like that, and that's when they're specializing, and you're going to end up being one of these guys and doing stuff like that, right? So anyhow, long story longer, they're about to finish off the whole deal, and this guy gets his court-martial. Now everybody finds out that they're really all going somewhere. And that looks like shit, because the guy did this thing, and he was topped so high that he was going to be somewhere for sure. Good marks and all. Wham! And he did this to try to be like, why can't I be one of the things? And they were like, hey, you didn't, that's what these people signed up for, and da-da-da kind of deal, but that's the way it works in the service. So he got into the court-martial, and whenever it came down to it, they literally lied to save face on the way that it looks. And the way that I understand it, it wasn't just like they misconstrued it a little bit. No, they just straight out acted like they had their 10 and this, that, and the other, and wouldn't have done it anyhow, and this, that, and the other and shit. They called my dad to the stand, and he stood up for him, and my dad called out the numbers, and they pulled out the little thing and called it off, and is that you, and is this your signature, and all that kind of crap with him, and he stood up for him. That's it. So that's the end of it, right? You think that's the end of it? So apparently after the end of that, boom, they call my dad in there, and then all of a sudden they're going to do some court-martial thing to him. And it's like, what the hell? Well, they find out all this, but so he wasn't supposed to tell anybody. And so he told somebody. So now this knocks him out, and he can't no longer be a pilot. And he was going to be a pilot. And no, he wasn't one of the 10 and all that shit. They're already gone. But he was going to be a pilot and fly over Korea. Okay? So I'm setting this all up for you so you understand it. And let's fast forward here. I don't want to go into his survival training and stuff. And he was in Thule, Greenland for a long time. And then all of a sudden he was and back and forth a few places, and in Shimmy, Alaska, right off the Sea of Okhotsk, and Russia, and they were doing things off there and stuff. And anyhow, so he ended up having a successful career. It didn't hamper him in a bit. He was the fastest man in the history of the United States Air Force to go from a non-commissioned officer to senior chief master sergeant of a base in the history of the Air Force at the time that he did it. And there's another phrase to that, in a non-lethal way or whatever, non-combatant thing. In other words, somebody didn't get killed, and that steps you up. Like, well, you're chief, pow, okay, you're senior chief, or something like that. So it really didn't delay him at all. But he ended up going into larger planes and doing electronic warfare, which I could get into at least some of it, and pretty much all of it that I know of what they had. It's so long ago, some of it might be still pseudo classified, but I couldn't explain it good enough to hurt America at all anyhow. But so he stood up for this guy in the court martial, and it knocked him out of OCS. This is Officers Candidate School, and it was kind of like Officer and a Gentleman. If you ever saw that movie, it's kind of that kind of situation is the way I pictured it. When you look through the pictures, you see it was a little different in this area and things, and they weren't wearing tighty whities and all that stuff. But anyhow, and nobody made them do push-ups in the rain and stuff like that yet. But whenever he had a survival training, that was quite hellish. So it knocked him out of there. Fast forward, and I'm wanting to get in the service, and I actually get groomed for the service, and they send me up to do a MEPS physical, and I get through the MEPS physical, and I peg hard in their test. And they basically are like, what do you want to do? And I said, I've already told you I want to be a flyboy. And he goes, everybody wants to be a flyboy right now, and Top Gun, and da-da-da. And I was like, yeah, I understand that. And you just said I pop hot, what do I want to do? And so they said, okay, we've got to run you through a rigorous test or whatever. And one of my eyes was not quite 20/20 vision. And back then they didn't do laser surgery and BS. So this knocked me out of being Officers Candidate School pilot, and I no longer could be, where's my pointer? I no longer could be Maverick, but I could be Goose. And I didn't want to be Goose. Nobody wants to be Goose, and whenever they eject, Goose gets killed and stuff, right? And so it's sad. So I didn't want to be Goose. So I came back, and my dad was the one that got the stuff, and he actually looked before I got to look. And come to find out later, he was concerned. And I was okay with it, because he was going to find out right then when I opened it up anyhow, but he'd already opened it and then closed it back. And he goes, that came for you and everything, and he was just kind of concerned and looking and wanted to sit in there with me whenever I did it and everything. So I opened it up and I found that out, and I was kind of pissed off. And I went off back and forth and everything, and I told him I don't, and so he was just talking me through it. And then I said, I don't even want to do it. I don't want to be in the Air Force if I can't do what I want to do in it. And then he goes, I understand that. And he let me go ahead and go and keep going and everything, and da-da-da. And he says, come here, let me show you something. And I said, I wanted to be a hero, and I wanted to be like you, and you didn't get to be a fly boy. And all of a sudden he puts his cigarette out and he goes, come here, let me show you something. And I was like, what? He's going to show me something I didn't know before or something? Okay, cool, Dad. All right, let's see. And he goes in there and he grabs that Hondo book. And he flips that thing open and he shows it to me and stuff. And I'll go, yeah, this is your Hondo book. I've looked through this 100 times, Dad. And he goes, take a look at those guys in the back. And he goes, yeah, I want to be. And I said, yeah, I want to be the heroes like this. And I'm showing him. And he goes, there's one thing about those people. They're heroes, son. But there's something else. And I was like, what? And he goes, they're dead. Give me a second. And so I said, what do you mean they're dead? And he goes, they're dead. And I said, all of them? And he said, all of them. Give me a second. So he said they were dead. And I said, what, they're dead? And he said, all of them. And I was like, all of them? And he goes, all of them. And it blew my mind. A rush came over my body, and it was a weird feeling. I remember my heart pumping when I heard that, and all of a sudden, it was one of those little life-changing little things. I was like, oh, what the hell? And he said, son, only about 5 of those guys made it back from Korea alive. Most of those went out in Vietnam, and they never made it back from Nam. And there was one, and he said something else, and this, that, and the other, and I could tell it had just choked him up. And it teared me up, and even talking about it now, it's one of the few times I've talked about it. But there's one thing I learned out of that, is that sometimes, so he goes, come on back in here, and I was choked up. I was like, wow, Dad, you know, what the fuck? Growing up, I was all like, these were heroes, and you had a chance to be the heroes and stuff. And he goes, come back in here where we can have cigarettes. We had a back room that then my mom had. We had an exit fan in it and crap. And so we went back in the back room and had some cigarettes. And so whenever I sat down, I started talking to him again. He said, you know, I waited to find out what you were going to say before I wanted to show you this type of thing. And then all of a sudden it came on me, and I couldn't not tell you about it. He said, there's lots of things in my military career I cannot tell you about, and you know that. But I wanted to share that with you after you made your decision. And I said, would you have told me if I would have made it? And he goes, I don't think so, son. And that blew me away. I thought about that a bunch of times after this. I mean, even I didn't even gonna fly or anything. And I thought about that moment of why wouldn't he tell me? Well, he wasn't gonna put some doubt right off in me right off the bat and go, yeah, you're gonna go kill yourself, son, or something like that. Yeah, that's why I always really looked at it. And I had a few angles on it, but it ended up being pretty much there whenever I was a youngster, all the way up through until I got married. I'm just, you know, and anyhow, so he told me then that what he learned out of that was that you always want to stand up for somebody. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about now? And he goes, I stood up for that man in a court-martial, and it knocked me out of OCS school, and that's the only reason I didn't go over to Korea. And the chances of me being one of the 5 or 6 people that made it out of Korea alive out of that 52 people would be really rolling the dice, son. But then they have Vietnam here and stuff, and so if I would have gone, and if I wouldn't have actually stood up for that man in his court-martial, then you wouldn't be born. Your brother, your sister, and you were all born after the fact. After I came back from my first TDY, I met your mother. And that just blew me away. And I've thought about that a lot of times in my life, and there's been times whenever I've seen, well, it might be as simple as the group, but I know at least 3 times that I stood up for somebody that was about to lose their job whenever I knew it was bullshit. And a couple of times it cost me my job too, pretty much. But I didn't give a damn. And, you know, so it kind of just fit. But I've always decided to stand up for somebody because, well, at least for my father, it worked in a correct way. I wouldn't say it worked in a perfect way for me or anything, and ta-da, I turned out being some kind of whatever, but at the same time, I think it's a good life lesson. This is no T-135 trainer, it looks like, and this is what they used to make the Thunderbirds out of, I believe. It's almost the same thing, or the trainer for it. F-18 Cobra. Tell you a story about Cobra and my dad. So he's stationed over in Vietnam, and they're, Let's see what I can tell you about this. And so they're doing electronic warfare over Laos, painting back in and finding the enemy and doing things because they can't shut up and keep off the radio. And my dad's using electronic warfare, and it's pinpointing them, and as my dad's flying along, you can pinpoint them within 10 foot of them while they're talking. And the machines they have in their computer in there are hooked up already to a computer, and they've got people all inside there. And these people, my dad spoke some, but they know how to speak the language, and also due to the frequencies are going on, the computer logs it in and basically figures out who's in conversation with who, and it logs that out. And if there's multiple conversations, it can log it out to multiple people, and it records the conversation, and you can sit and listen to it over and over again while you're doing it and everything, see what the hell they got going on, and it records it out, and you're supposed to try to put it in and stuff. And my dad's not the guy trying to figure out this language, but he's in the flight crew up in the planes doing this, and this is done in RC-135s. It's like the big black and white plane that we were looking at earlier with the double jet things onto it. It has like a chipmunk package put onto it that's around, looks like cheeks packages onto it, and this is what's doing the electronic warfare, you know, kind of up here on the plane, and like that's got a little bulge. They got this big old cheek thing on the side of them. So let's go ahead and go through a couple more of these pictures while I'm talking. So he, wow, a lot of frost on the wings and stuff, it looks like. F4 Phantom. And so he's flying, and out there where he's flying out of, and the base that they're using is also being used by SR-71 Blackbirds. Now this is the fastest plane that's ever been created that we know about, and it's clocked to go Mach 3.5. I built a whole bunch of models as I was a kid, and I built one of these before this time right here, and my dad said it'd go a lot faster than that. If you figure out how fast they said that it went from here to here in this amount of time, it beats that number, son. And I was like, what? And he goes, they got it up and they refueled it and turned it around the other way and shot it, zoom, and they went from here to here in a certain amount of time. You figure it out. And it's faster than that. So anyhow, they had those flying out of there, and they had a Cobra like was what was on that plane back there on the back of it, and they had painted it with this symbol, and it was just all black, and it had this symbol of the Cobra on it, and it they said Ichiban, and it means number one. Okay, so fast forward here, and my dad's over there, and he gets his TDYs every once in a while, and they're allowed to go here and stuff, and there's a golf course, but it's way the hell away. But there's these golfers that are all going to go to that town or whatever, and they'll be able to play golf and do all that, stay for a day or two and come back and blah blah blah, and party, let loose steam, do all the things, right guys? So he goes out there, anyhow, he's playing golf, and when they play golf at this place, they have a lady that is your caddy, and she's this little Japanese woman. My dad always showed me, she's 4 foot tall. She's this little Japanese woman, and she pulls your carts out. She knows the distances. They come out with you, and you hit practice balls. As soon as you hit a few practice balls, she tells you, she knows what your numbers are in here and stuff. Whenever they call your thing, then you go. And you do it, and they're playing in these little groups, and for some reason they weren't playing in groups, but they were trying to do them off in singles and shoot somebody off on number 9 and number 1 at the same time, or number 10 and number 1 at the same time, because you could do 9 and come back and then 10 around and do it or whatever, something like that. Anyhow, so he's with this lady, and he hits the ball way off into the side things and stuff, and instead of having to force him around, they only have the other guy. He's out in the fairway. And so whenever they go over to the side to go get his ball, the lady that's there starts all no at him and stuff, and he's like, what? And so he comes back to grab a club, and he starts to grab a club, and she puts his hand on his hand, and then she pulls it away like, I wasn't supposed to touch you. And he's like, what the hell's going on here? And so he grabs the 5-iron. He's going to go find his golf ball. He's going to go ahead and knock it out of there, and then he's going to hit it. And then she's on, no, 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 no. And he goes, this, you know, like, this is the right club kind of situation. And all of a sudden, next thing he knows, there's somebody tugging on his clothes. And he turns around and she's standing there cowered with her hands in front of her like she's praying, and she's leaning her head down. And my dad's like, what the hell's going on? So he starts to walk again towards the bushes, and all of a sudden she pulls on him real hard. She goes, no, no, no. She walks over and gets in front of him. And she says, Habu, Ichiban. She puts her hand out like a cobra and says, and points. Literally, right in front of my father is a cobra. About 3 steps away and 1 step into the bushes, and she sees it. So he says, that's fine, I'll just lay one out of here, like a joke. Man, I'm getting emotional tonight. I shouldn't be drinking, guys. And so, oh man, this is my father, so what the hell, I feel like shedding and sharing with you. I can't really feel like as a man I can talk to anybody about this, but I can just do this, huh? So, Ichiban. Right? She was so scared on the rest of the whole round that my dad was going to tell, and she was going to lose my job. She was about to lose her mind. My dad kept trying to explain to her it was all okay, and then he appreciated her and everything, and she thought, no. So he promised he wasn't going to tell. She's real happy. He slipped her like 20 extra bucks or something off on the whole deal, and she about lost her mind out of that too. Anyhow, so I thought that was one of the neatest little stories that are out of that. So my dad tells me that story when we're out playing golf one day, and he tells me, you know, I'm going to go down the creek and get some, and there's a cart path where it goes over it, but I'm going to go down there and look for my ball. And he goes, watch out for snakes, son. And I'm like, okay. So then, I don't know, a couple of times later we're playing golf, and you know, snake thing's always on my mind, and my dad was deathly afraid of snakes. Had a coach whip snake, tried to chase him, black racer, tried to chase him whenever he was a kid. Used to go frog gigging. They almost got bit a couple of times and stuff, and it's just a thing that my dad had for snakes. I've mentioned it before in another video where just the sight of him, and I brought a water moccasin home one day, and he just beat the hell out of it right in front of me, slapped me down and everything, and then showed me that it was poisonous. And then if it would have bit me down where I was, I'd have a hard time explaining to him what happened whenever I got there. So, he told me about this. We're golfing and everything. It's another snake story that goes along with that. In fact, I think I brought it up because of looking at that snake book and talking about them. Of course, my dad don't like talking about snakes, but here my little fucking kid doing the shit. And we hit the ball off one of these holes, and it goes off to the right and down over and into this creek type area, and Dad's going to go down there looking out of it, and I'm going to go over there and everything. And he goes over there, and he's just standing, and I go out and I get a club too, and I start going down the hill, and he goes, nah, like that. And I go, what? And I stop on the hill, kind of ka, and he goes, no. And he puts his hand up and he says, Ichiban, and points. There's a big old water moccasin standing right there, and there's a ball sitting right beside him, and he goes, I'd lay one down if I was you. So we made a joke out of it, but I was just a stupid kid, and I was fixing to jump right where that son of a bitch was, and about 3 more steps and hopping into the little creek bed. And that one was bigger than the one that was going to bite me. So that was pretty cool. And the next hole was a hole that was really a par 3, but I was so young of a kid at this point, I could barely reach it, even if I used a fairway wood off the tee. And I remember knocking it on and having a chance at birdie. It was like 6 foot. And I played like a little giggle kid whenever I did the putt, and kind of lurched at it and didn't even make it actually there and stuff. And I was like, give me another shot at it. And he goes, there's no other shots in golf. Anyhow,